So I want you to have a big round of applause for Paul Sonkamble.
You're on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for letting me do this, because otherwise I wasn't going to get a chance to sit down all weekend. So I'm really happy you could do this. We have a number of invited guests from a number of different places at Music Tech Fest Scandinavia, and one of our, well, we're calling them VIPs, I guess that's a fair term, is Paul. He's, when we invited him here, you were head of global business. Turn a bit in that way. Is this my good side? We happy? Awesome. Oh yeah, an over-the-shoulder shot. I've seen this in television. It's an over-the-shoulder shot. When we invited you here to Music Tech Fest, you were head of global business for Warner Music, internationally, head of global.
I was running creative business development for EMEA.
Right.
So Europe, Middle East, and Africa, looking at the non-licensing deals, all of the kind of people that are, all the companies that you invite to your Tech Fest.
Right. Fantastic. And now you're not. And
no,
so,
I'm not.
So why are you here exactly? What brings you to Music Tech Fest? What was your kind of motivation to be involved?
I'm still massively fascinated by technology and creators. I work with creators on a daily basis. Our artists are creators, and on the electronic side, they're using a lot of the things that have been potentially started off as just ideas in someone's head. So one of our clients, an electronic duo called Canvas, make most of their music on a machine and on push. So, I mean, those started off as just ideas in someone's head at Ableton, I'm sure.
So you have a company now called Deerlily.
Deerlily.
What is it?
It's a bit of a mashup of just things I've always wanted to do. The name is after my kids. My son is called Oscar, and that means apparently deer lover in Irish. And his little sister is called Lily, so we called it Deerlily. Right now, it's a management company and a publishing company, a boutique publisher. So we started 1st of April, and we've quickly signed 5 really exciting Swedish acts, and we will soon publish for them as well. And that's basically what it is.
You're not from Sweden, though, are
I'm
you?
not from Sweden.
Why are you in Sweden?
I thought it was an interesting story at first, but it's like everyone else. Love. I started saying I got injured on the tennis tour because I thought that was a bit more interesting. But like every other expat, came for a lady.
Okay, so you described yourself as a failed producer. What did you fail to produce?
Actually, it was I remember the moment quite well. It was like 1998. I was sitting on a bus in Crystal Palace on the way back from college where I was studying music production. It was about 6 months into the course, and back then we were using Cubase 1.2, I think. So I'd exported my latest masterpiece to cassette, and I was listening to it on the bus, and I'd left the metronome on for a start, so that was recorded on the tape. And I'm gonna have to swear here, it was utter shit. I had this kind of eureka moment where I realized it was of no artistic or commercial value whatsoever. So I never went back. And then I'd been sitting there playing with computers for a while, and I thought, well, I better get a job. And then a job came up at a big ad agency, a big Leo Burnett part of Publicis. And this was this was 1998. Wasn't really any kind of digital stuff happening. Mm-hmm. So they were hiring kind of digital-minded people, and that seemed like a good fit.
So you became digitally minded by using computers, or you were using computers because you were digitally minded?
I think maybe a combination of the two. I think at the time it was music production on computer was in its infancy. I was always fascinated by technology and even just gadgetry. I think there was a story from my mum that she was on the phone once when I was really young, and I took the video apart. I don't think I managed to put it back together. So I was always fascinated by how things work, the function and electronics and computers especially. So it was a natural fit, and I've always loved music. So that was what led to the kind of dream of being a producer, but that didn't pan out.
I guess the hack camp then makes a lot of sense to you, that kind of methodology.
It really does. Even from the mentality of it all the way up to the actual kind of how it presents itself and the creation and and looking at the teams working is really still fascinating to me. Still, still gives you kind of like gets the hairs on your arm standing up.
Fantastic. So you're here to judge some of these hacks.
Yeah.
What's your kind of impression, without giving anything away, what's your kind of impression of the kind of thinking that's going into these hacks?
I think what's really interesting is how much hardware has been used. It was really great to see things actually been created. I've been to, when I was working at EMI and Warner, we went to a lot of hacks, and a lot of it was software based. Excuse me, and a lot of it was kind of recycling ideas and recycling API usage. Like give me a song for cloudy weather, but seeing people actually create prototypes of things and some of the things that outside have been really fascinating to look at. I think if everyone hasn't seen them, go and check out the cube and the one-handed guitar and the really great stuff.
There's been a lot of fantastic stuff that's been created at Music Tech Fest over the last few years, and some of those projects have gone to have a life beyond the festival. Is there any opportunity, do you think, for any of these projects to become kind of real-world art pieces or businesses or
absolutely.
research projects?
I think what technology has done for music is removed barriers. So if you think about the model, first of all, with iTunes debundling albums, but also anybody can get their music into Spotify. There's a number of different services where you have a song, you can upload it, and it will turn up on Spotify. So we're taking down barriers. I really like the projects I saw that are removing barriers for music creation. So the being able to create melodies with mind. That was amazing, and being able to jam with a small box that you can move to affect pitch by turning it. I think those have real commercial value for entertainment.
Fantastic. As far as your kind of journey through the music industry is concerned, do you think there's anything, I guess, symbolic of the fact that you're kind of retreating from the major record labels and focusing on the very small?
I think it kind of ties in quite nicely to what's going on here. It's the hack mentality, being a lean startup in a way, and just really being able to blast through the work. And that's sometimes difficult in large organizations. With a large organization comes a certain amount of bureaucracy and not always moving at high speed, should we say.
Are those large organizations still able to kind of have the same symbolic meaning within this kind of environment? Is there sort of, I guess, a niche carved out now for those big organizations, or do you think there's a kind of a receding of the corporate way of doing things and an increase in the, I mean, is it that profound, or is it just a kind of a slight shifting of ratios?
I mean, I think what's happening with the music business is the power is being, or the record business is being debundled. So in 5 to 10 years, it will be entirely service driven. It will be modular, and you take the pieces you need and you put it all together. And you've got great tech disruptors actually affecting that change. So people like Cobalt, for example, using big data and really kind of putting the cat amongst the pigeons for the publishing business. And I think the labels, you've got companies like TuneCore that started up as it was just a startup. And I think what's happening is that all of those parts that were, I mean, the term major label, that comes from the ones that had manufacturing. So that's the term between major and independent label. Independents didn't manufacture themselves. And that's all being debundled now. Everything is being taken apart, and they do still have a place. I think the major labels, they have reach and influence and prestige, but the actual parts are being taken away. So nobody needs a record deal to distribute their music anymore. I think that's quite profound.
Is it a good thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's absolutely a good thing, and it's allowed the access to millions and millions and millions and millions of songs for anybody out there, anyone with an internet connection.
I'm very aware, though, that, for instance, the music industry, as it was over 100 years ago, was printing dots on paper.
Yeah.
And the recording industry came along when the technological environment changed, and it killed, in inverted commas, the music industry. It became the music industry, in effect. And so what the record labels have been for the last 100 years, they were the music industry in the same way that the publishing companies were the music industry before them.
Right.
Do you think we've had enough of a shift now where there is a new group of people that we can say, no, the record companies aren't the music industry, these guys are the music industry, and if so, who are they?
I mean, well, it's the creators, and be they the musical creators or the creators of the technology that enables it. I think that's quite a good point. I think the labels, or certainly the major labels, are losing power because you can create a whole album if you so wish, just sitting in a park with your machine or with your push.
Is that something that people want to do, though? Make an album? Is album the useful concept? Or
yeah.
because it seems there are people making forms of musical expression that are different than the single, the album, the radio show. There are kind of different ways of approaching it. And it's not just that we used to do things one way and now we do things another way. It's like we used to do things one way and now we do it every way.
Yeah, I think what's happened is the industry is affecting, or technology has affected how we are creating music. So the prevalence of something like Spotify in Sweden means that the labels release generally singles, because we know that singles work better for Spotify. When you're competing for somebody's time rather than for their transaction, you have to capture attention. So that's done with singles rather than releasing 12 tracks, because you will see that the tail end of the album will have less plays. So I think absolutely new formats are really, really interesting, and the old formats were governed by the mediums they were recorded onto.
I think one of the things that's interesting about that is that the way that the music companies, or the record labels particularly, are interested in making money from music is by making large numbers of small amounts of money. Is there anyone out there who are making small numbers of large amounts of money?
I think that's probably the small numbers of large amounts of money. So, I think if you read anything about like the long tail, it's the people right now with the most power are the ones with the most catalogue. But Spotify and streaming services have kind of changed the definition of what catalogue means. It really means anything released before 2005. When the record labels call anything after 18 months catalogue recordings or so.
Wow. I'm somebody who used to own and run a record label, and this is no further, I mean, it was a long time ago, but it was no further ago than the 1990s, so it's not kind of ancient history. But one of the things that I'm very aware of is that because that record label only existed for a short period of time and now doesn't anymore, there are some of the recordings that just don't exist anymore. And so it kind of feels like that there's an archival responsibility for somebody like EMI, for instance, to hold on to and preserve and make available, I guess, these archival recordings. And such an amazing opportunity to do that with digital technology.
Yeah.
Are those opportunities being taken?
Well, I think in Sweden, everything that's recorded or released by a Swedish label has to be sent to the National Archive, and I think there's 150 years worth of recordings, and that's by all of the labels send a copy. So those are all archived. Of course, they haven't all been made available digitally, but it's I think that's scarcity is making that quite interesting. I think something like you say, making those available is amazing.
What is it about Sweden? I mean, Sweden is, per capita, the single biggest exporter of music in the world. In fact, there are only 3 exporters of music in the world, and Sweden is, per capita, the biggest of them. What is it about Sweden?
I think of as in why it creates so much good music. I think of course.
I didn't say that. I said they were good at exporting.
Good at exporting music. Okay. I think now, not to get into politics, but I think a strong socialist democracy where music is valued and children are encouraged to play an instrument and given that opportunity in schools certainly helps.
Is that a real thing? I mean, is that that significant a thing?
I strongly believe that, yeah.
Yeah. And what is that kind of, I mean, encouragement is one thing, but are there kind of systems in place where you look at it and go, look, if only, let's say, Britain did this in schools, how amazing.
Well, I mean, look at Britain, for example. One of the first things they do when they're cutting costs is from the arts. There's a great TED documentary via, I think, Ken Robinson, talking about how we need to, now we're getting into a completely abstract thought, but how we need to readdress what's important in terms of knowledge. What we base most importance on now is due to Victorian thinking about industrialization, and we take money away from the arts so that they cut music budgets in schools.
And music, I mean, learning music in schools isn't just about learning to be a musician for a job. There's a lot more that comes out of that, and I think that's kind of one of the really interesting things, that the benefits, if we're going to be polemical about this, the benefits of teaching kids music is not so that you can export lots of music and lots of people can have jobs in it, but actually it makes people's lives better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So your history and your career has been, at least for the last 12 years, largely about finding ways in which music has been made that can create enough value for people where it can create a living for people and it can create economies. And I like the idea of that, because I mean, as kind of critical as we can be of these kind of corporate capitalist infrastructures, ultimately what they're doing is finding a way where this is really valuable to a large group of people. We can make it available to them and they can experience this. How do you identify that value? How do you kind of spot, like, this music, those people?
I think data plays a really, really big part in that. If you look at some of the great companies that were startups, like Music Metric, just been sold to Apple, and Next Big Sound, just been sold to Pandora, taking all of that data around audience and the demographics, and doing a lot of things that have been going on for a while in other businesses, and the way supermarkets can send you offers for things that they know you want to buy. So we are matching audience to recording.
Well, in respect, though, the music industry is kind of the canary in the coal mine for the rest of the media industries, because, I mean, it hit music first. Napster happened to music because music files are smaller than video files. They're not as, they work differently than books, for instance. So I guess it's really interesting that music's gone through this transition first. Is there anything that retrospectively, I guess, we can learn from that we can go, hey, movie guys, what we did there, don't do that?
Well, I think basically everything the record business has done around piracy should be a lesson of what not to do. I think it was one failure after another. Copy control was a mess. The reluctance to support digital services was a complete mess. I think it's almost follow the opposite of what the record business did.
It's really interesting because there are so many jobs in the music industry that aren't to do with record labels. I mean, the music industry with capital letters is everything from people who manufacture musical instruments to people who take tickets at venues and so on. So when you think of it as a whole ecology or an ecosystem, when we talk about the record, or we talk about the music industry, like for instance in the newspaper, the music industry says that, we all in our heads think the record companies, like in fact the major record companies, and I always think that calling the music industry, or calling the record labels the music industry, is kind of like calling the lions the zoo. You think there's a lot more really kind of interesting stuff going on there, but I think when we have these shifting ratios, some things become more important. I have a kind of an ecological framework for this, and you think of like a small rocky pool, and when when the environment changes, the thing that was the dominant thing becomes less dominant, and other things start to come up. What are the other things starting to come up? What are the areas that are kind of coming in to replace the kind of the importance and the centrality of the major record labels, do you think?
I think certainly the things around distribution, digital distribution, fans being able to market directly artists being able to market directly to fans themselves. The use of Bandcamp is people using that. SoundCloud, being able to reach an audience. I think it's also to do with marketing, how we've gone from creating this, like in the 60s you created a message and you broadcast it as widely as possible. Now that doesn't work. You have to create these conversations, these relationships. And I think that's a lot of that, the power has been given back to the artists to be able to do that themselves. And if you think about, for example, Instagram, this was a really interesting conversation I had with someone the other day around technology and artists using it. So Facebook, they make it very easy to manage multiple Facebook accounts, the same with Twitter. And I was thinking to myself, why can't a band's manager, so we have 5 acts, why can't I manage all 5 of their Instagram channels from one place? And someone I was talking to raised a really interesting point, and they said, perhaps that's intentional, as in that friction is added to keep a sense of credibility or a sense of realness to it, as in the only answer is that the artists have to manage them themselves. So I think that's an interesting one. Basically empowering artists to own the relationship with their fans is something that technology is doing.
One of the criticisms I've heard of that idea, though, I've got a friend who points out to me that this environment sort of benefits the gregarious. The people who will go on there and talk and make connections with people, and there are a lot of artists in the world that just don't want to do that. They want to, in fact, hide from the world and sit in their room and make music and send it out there and have somebody else. I mean, whether it's because they're shy, whether because they're not particularly good at promotion or they don't have business skills or whatever, but the idea that now you can be your own manager or now you can be your own record label, so a lot of people say, I don't really want to.
No, absolutely, and that's why, I mean, the record deals in Sweden are very, very fair. They're very, most labels would offer an artist a complete rev share or like a joint venture. But when you spell out to them every part that takes place, often they will say, well, great, let's just sign an artist deal where you own the masters, but you do all of the promotion and you do all of the other things that come with it. But I think it's really interesting to be able to identify those things. So I think the artists are given much more freedom around understanding what the parts are in the value chain.
You seem to sit in the middle of those things. Well, Deerlily, basically, you are kind of, I guess, in the scale of things, below the major record labels and above
Absolutely.
the artists. What's that position? What does that mean in there?
I think with Deerlily, we work for the artists. That's the difference. In a way, you could say the artists work for the labels, but we're employed by the artists to manage their careers. Slightly different in the publishing setup, but that's where we feel that we have to provide a service. So that's very motivating. That the people paying us are the creators, and we're delivering a service to them.
And you mentioned data being really important in that. How do you use data?
Well,
is it like, are we talking spreadsheets or are we talking?
I'm scared of spreadsheets.
Right.
No, we use all of the things available to us. So my morning thing on the train is always I look at my next big sound and my music metrics, see how the stats are, see where that we're being played. There's some more great technology. So there's a company from Norway called Music DNA that will monitor every radio station worldwide, so we can see why is that track being played in Vienna, and we have to try and figure that out. So we're using that to try and target or make most effective where we ask our artists to be and the type of audience they're creating and who we're talking to.
What's the danger in over-relying on data, though? Surely that takes, I mean, it becomes prescriptive.
I think I think there's a really fine line, and I think there's too many people saying the word data-driven. I don't think we should be data-driven, we should be data-informed. Certainly with music, it shouldn't, otherwise we will pander and we will create the same thing over and over again. If you think about someone like Motown, they didn't do any consumer research. They told the consumer that this is the next hit. So I think we can be smart around how we use data and let it help us to make better decisions. But this is still a very touchy-feely creative business where we're being given someone's creative work and it shouldn't be created based on a set of numbers.
Well, I get the sense that, I mean, you look at the groundbreaking albums throughout history that have kicked at the edge of what's possible with the technology, right from the Beatles' White Album and Sgt. Pepper's through to, OK Computer is a really good example of, people going into a recording studio and going, what else can this do?
Sure.
But within a real kind of popular music mindset and framework, are there still people doing that? Are there people who are just going, not just what is expected of me based on my market research, but, where else can we take this?
I think absolutely. I think when it comes down to the creation, I think people are always trying to push the boat. I think they're actively. Of course, there are some people, there are some artists, and they're more than happy to make kind of pastiche versions of whatever hit is out there now. But I think there are also creators that want to do something very special.
You seem really optimistic about where this is all going, and actually you'd have to be really optimistic to do what you just did, and leave like a real top job in a major music corporation and start off on your own small music company. Where does that optimism come from, and is it a good idea?
I think pretty, I don't know, fueled by kind of whiskey and indignation for the way things are meant to work. So we have created this little family in a very short time with 5 artists we really, really believe in, and we get to affect change right at the beginning, rather than having an idea at Warner and trying to run it through the ranks and trying to turn the ship around. We get to be right on the front line.
Wonderful. Paul Sonkamble, thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks, Andrew. Cheers.